What is your strategic goals? You need to. Do you know how many applications do you have in your company? For example, if you ask this question in a lot of companies, most of them said no, maybe thousands or so on, but I don't know how many applications. Okay, and do you know how many permissions? Do you know how many people access to this application? And do you have an error models with all of them? And a segregation of those and access reviews and reporting, for example. Most of them, 99% of time, the answer is no, at least at one of these things. And this type of things, you don't need to spend thousands of dollars, of euros in a tool. You just need a team and focused on this type of things. So if you need a roadmap, first of all, you must answer all of these questions. And if the answer is, I have the Ferrari parked in my house, but I don't know how many applications do I have. So your problem is not technical, it's about governance.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you very much for being on today's episode. To get things going, tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you, James. So, Daniel Álvarez. I am a senior manager at PwC, where I am specialized in cybersecurity, specifically in identity and access management. Over years, I've dedicated my career to helping organizations and companies secure specifically identity and access management solutions.
And it's not just PwC, is it? You're also the creative. Is it the Future of Digital Identity newsletter?
Yeah, sure. My newsletter on LinkedIn. I've worked several years in the sector, and I think that there are no specific places to learn about digital identity and access management. And over the last years, I usually have to train my teams and talk with another colleagues, and usually we take all of this more informally. But where is the place, the official place which we can speak about that? A forum, a group, and specific places there isn't. So I think, why can't I started a newsletter about identity and access management and digital identity. So I started in January, publishing every day. Sometimes I publish every 2 days with a lot of topics, all of them related to identity. Some days cyber attacks, other days best practices, guides, and so on.
Yeah, I've scrolled through. I've seen lots of content. There's a plethora of different things, right? I think you were looking at the updated rules on NIST recently. I've seen lots of guides, and that's actually the reason what led me to reach out to yourself, because there was one particular piece of content that I read and I thought it was very interesting. And in truth, there were lots of elements which I know I've come across, I've seen, but I've never really sort of put them down on paper before. And it was this. It's your I am survival guide, 7 mistakes you're probably making and how to fix them. What inspired you to make this, first of all?
Yeah. The idea is behind this survival guide came from years of frustration and from seeing the same painful patterns repeat across dozens of projects. So I've worked with large enterprises, public sector, governments, tech companies, who were all investing heavily in identity and access management. But no matter the region of the industry, I keep encountering the same situation. Right, initiatives driven by compliance tool adoptions instead of solving real business problems. Sometimes just appear that I need to spend a lot of money in identity and access management, and I don't know how or why. And I've seen teams burn out implementation tools they didn't fully understand because there are not trainings, and this is a very complex scope of cybersecurity. For the other side, I've seen platforms left half configured because the initial roadmap over ambitious. So maybe I need to protect all of application, thousands, hundreds of applications. No, there are too much. No, you must be focused on the most important things. No, not all. That's why I create a survival guide. It's a guide with my experience in many years of projects. Not there isn't technical steps. There are. It's more. It's a mindset most of times, and advices like you must. You need SLAs or don't waste in IGH tools and so on, and more common sense in a few cases. That is why I create the IAM Survival Guide. Goal is simple: keep professionals, avoid the most common traps, and build identity programs that are realistic, relevant, and sustainable. It's my objective. Right.
We're going to talk about we're going to talk on about identity access management, but what you're talking about kind of resonates, I guess, across any cybersecurity project. There are always buried bodies along the way. There are always ways in which it was tried to be done, tried and tested, and more times than not, I guess, failed, or people have always tried to bite off more than they can chew. And I think you call it out very nicely in this guide. It's and I'm paraphrasing, so correct me if I get this wrong. I think you said something like, you can get into the trap of building a Ferrari when you only need a bike. Yeah. So aligning IAM leaders complexity against business maturity, because you might have a lot of complexity, but if you're not a mature enough organization to deliver against that complexity in a 6-month window or a 12-month window, you've got to change those expectations, haven't you? So can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, the Ferrari. Yeah, it's very illustrative. No, you need to go to your office and you have two choices. You can buy the Ferrari, or you can buy a motorbike or a bike, or walk to your office. You don't need to buy a Ferrari. And the identity and access management programs are usually with an over complexity, and there are too many ambitious. We want to build a future-proof, secure system, deploying all the best. But for example, you have legacy applications. Your team are not prepared to use this type of tools, and so on. So one of my first frustration is that in practice, the balance comes down with one principle, that companies can absorb all this functionality with, for example, SailPoint, Okta, One Identity, and so on. This type of tools have hundreds of functionalities. Most of them are impressive, are very, very good with that, but what happens? These tools come with wide array of functionalities, yet frequently only the minimum necessary is configured to solve the original problem. A company recently needs to buy this identity and access management tool, and they only need password management. They only need that. So you need to buy the Ferrari. Yeah, you can buy them, but they are very expensive. For instance, you might have an issue with your user onboarding, for instance, no? And successfully address it, and you buy these type of tools. But what about the other functionalities? Permission request, segregation of duties, permission review, reporting, role mining. These features are often remain unused. This can lead to certain paradox. On one hand, tools continue to add increasingly sophisticating functionalities, which generally causes the license price to rise, and more expensive. No, and on the other hand, the client does not appreciate these new functionalities and focuses solely on the price. But they only need to solve one problem: the onboarding experience. For example, you don't need to buy the Ferrari, and if you buy them, you need to learn how to drive it, and because you need to evolve and attain a high maturity in your company. So you can use all of this functionality. And if you use all of this functionality, probably the price are cheap, but there are problems with our clients usually, and in the market or in this sector, I usually see this type of problems. It is crucial that organizations view these tools not just a short-term solution to a specific problem, but a strategic investment to improve these processes. But but here there's another problem. Companies need teams that understand all of this. Maybe an identity team specialized of this topic. But and they are expensive, and not all companies have these strategic priorities.
Yeah, and something that we're starting to see more in the market now, more dedicated IDAM teams now as part of that larger sort of IT functionality. But it's very interesting what you're saying there, because I mean, ultimately what you're saying is companies need to build a realistic roadmap, and you need to find that balance. You need something that achieves the short-term objective, you recognize a long-term objective, and you still got to balance it out with the day job. You can't put pressure onto teams and increase that probability of burnout or things like that. There's a whole plethora of different things. So I guess my question is, there's likely two situations. There will be listeners out there who are looking into improving their identity posture. So I guess, how could they build a realistic roadmap in preparation? Because I appreciate what you're saying. If you only have to sort the JML, you don't necessarily need to go and buy something with full attestation or segregation of duties and all that capability, if it's just a JML use case you're trying to solve. But I can imagine that there are listeners out there who, whether they consciously or subconsciously, decide that they will still pick the Ferrari because it has, it's that phrase, future proof. Yeah. Might not utilize it, but it's future proofed. So how could somebody build a realistic roadmap before they've bought a Ferrari? But then equally, people that have purchased that Ferrari, how can they learn to drive it?
Yeah, sure. First of all, you need to understand what type of car do you need. Maybe you need a Ferrari, but maybe you need a bike. So I think that the first of all is you need to analyze what is your situation. So you need to think about that. Maybe, for example, in our company, we usually do an assessment. So we came to a company, we analyze all of the processes related to identity and access management, and we can detect what is your problems. So maybe your onboarding processes are very well, and you don't need the most expensive tools, and maybe you need only just an applications catalog or airbag models, for example, or another type of things related to identity governance. For example, in my experience, companies only focus technical tools and technical problems. You need to have a leader. You need a leader, the identity governance leader. Maybe this person needs a team and needs strategic goals. What is your strategic goals? You need to. Do you know how many applications do you have in your company? For example, if you ask this question in a lot of companies, most of them said no, maybe thousands or so on, but I don't know how many applications. Okay, and do you know how many permissions? Do you know how many people access to this application? And do you have an error models with all of them? And a segregation of those and access reviews and reporting, for example. Most of them, 99% of time, the answer is no, at least at one of these things. And this type of things, you don't need to spend thousands of dollars, of euros in a tool. You just need a team and focused on this type of things. So if you need a roadmap, first of all, you must answer all of these questions. And if the answer is, I have the Ferrari parked in my house, but I don't know how many applications do I have. So your problem is not technical. It's about governance, for example, or maybe it's about compliance. Maybe I have all of this, but I have very risk about uh, regulations and so on. Maybe the problem is with this topic. So you need to understand all of these type of problems. And if you know where's your mainly problems, you can create a roadmap. Create a roadmap. It's simple if you know all of these things.
And you raised a interesting point there about mapping your processes, because one of the things that obviously comes up is how do you manage identity in cloud apps, in SaaS? So you mentioned there about, if you ask questions to customers, what applications you got, there's loads of shadow IT out there where they'll have company email addresses assigned and signed up to subscription services that IT and people have absolutely no idea what's out there, or even what kind of information they're sharing to these providers. But you raise a good point in your survival guide, in that IAM, it's not the cloud IAM, it's your responsibility and not your providers. And I think this ties very well with one of the other points. Is it mistake number 2? Sorry, the IAM team is always firefighting and SLAs and things of that nature, because ultimately, if you have, like you said, if you have a dedicated team, a department that is looking after identity, quite a lot of these teams are firefighting. They are reacting to tickets, they're reacting to escalations, they're reacting to this. So if you're in that world, how can you drive or leverage SLAs to help build that roadmap? Because it's all well and good saying you need a roadmap, but you have to quantify a starting point to understand how the roadmap lays on top to get you from that current state to that future state.
Yeah, sure.
How can you use SLAs to your advantage?
Sure, it's a very good point, because if you have a roadmap, you need SLAs and so on. And it's very typical. Their access management teams are only dedicated to resolve issues. So it's a really good problem, because you need to stop. Someone needs to stop. I don't know who, but someone needs to stop and think about it. Where are we going? Where are we going? So if you have a roadmap, the half of the path, it's done. So very well. But you need some type of KPIs or some type of metrics. So if you need to define this, the first step is what we need about SLAs. What is our very best problem? Are of onboarding times, are deactivation user access. It's about incident responses, all of this and none of this. You need to recover your metrics and your data, because another interesting point, there are no much focus about identity and access management needs a very good report and a very good dashboard. Because what is your onboarding times? If you go to any companies and I can ask, what is your onboarding time? Internal onboarding time. 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. I show these three metrics. So you first of all need to think about what is our current metrics, and your roadmap must improve these metrics. And in our survival guide, I recommend 4 onboarding times, because efficient onboarding processes that are critical as they directly impact in business operation and employee productivity. If you can reduce this time it takes to run new user access to necessary system, is vital for seamless integration into the roles and so on. Other topics, access to critical access, the activation user access is very, very important. You must deactivate users, externals, vendors, and so on, rapidly removing access for users who leave the organization. And in my experience, there are usually a lot of problems about this topic. So an incident response, developing a robust incident response plan, it's basic. Maybe one day, 1 week. No, you must resolve critical incidents at least in 3 or 4 hours. And if not, you have a problem. So, and maybe in addition to these survival metrics, I think that the fifth metric that relates to entity governance is very important, right? This involves, for example, the number of applications that have a comprehensive governance model in place, such as you maybe have 1,000 of applications, but how many of these applications have in a model should include features like approval workflows for permission requests, segregation of duties, periodic permissions reviews, and others to the principle of least privilege. How many of these? A few, maybe a few of them. So maybe if you define a model with all of these features, you can start in, but okay, this year I need to do these best practices in at least my critical application. And where is my critical applications? This is another point of view. If you don't know where is your critical applications, you have another different problem, right? So it's a complex topic, in my opinion.
You mentioned a good one there about instant response. You need to respond to them within a 3-4 hour period. But and I'm going to pick on the lever aspect there of what you mentioned about getting rid of access. In your experience at PwC, obviously working in IAM for years now, and all different types of organizations from enterprise to mid-size to obviously smaller ones as well. I always find that the topic of accounts or ghost accounts, should we call them, a bit of an interesting one. How do you define offboarding in terms of that? Is it just removal of access, or is it going to all of these disparate systems and removing James Oakes's account if I left the company?
Yeah, well, here there is a common problem, right? That maybe if you need to offboard an employee, the most easiest way is remove from Active Directory, for example, right? But what about applications that are not controlled by an identity governance tool? For example, access to a legacy application who has a specific user account. Most of times, sadly, I see that these type of applications are not taken into account, and you have hundreds of people in these user databases, and most of them are not in the company, but still here because no one take this task of removing or at least review monthly how many of my users are not in the company right now. One is okay, so I'm going to remove from my legacy systems. This is a very typical problem. And what happens if these access are, for example, internet access? Maybe you don't need an Active Directory account. You can access and you don't need to stay on the company network. So months ago, an employee has gone to the company and the next month they still have access to some applications. Maybe are not critical, but stay here and maybe there are relevant data. Usually companies must improve this type of processes, in my experience.
And just somebody who I know is passionate about mentoring, the next generation, like you said at the start of this, helping out your team. You've started your newsletter to try and help with that education piece. Identity access management can be a minefield, and that's for veterans as well as people coming into the skill set today, which is a growing requirement, as we know, throughout the industry. I guess, what kind of skills and mindsets do you think are most valuable for IAM professionals today?
Yeah, I have here a specific approach because, well, in my current job, I usually work as recruiter and I need to find professionals to work in entity and access management services. Usually it's complicated because it little known sectors. When people hear about cybersecurity and get interested, they tend to want to move a more well-known and attractive area like hacking and so on. In entity and access management it's not an attractive area. But I think that this in reality is that this area of work is one of the most important because sets up the foundation for the system and processes of all authentication and authorization. And for your question, I think that in this area we need two type of people. Maybe technical profiles like developers and so on that and this type of profile it's important to know about programming and coding and so on. But I think that there is important another type of profile more related to functional or governance profile, and this profile is related to, for example, make a roadmap. If you need to create a roadmap and set up the basis and talk about with all of areas of an organization or a company and talk with the CISO and talk with a lot of people, you need another type of profile, more generalistic profile. Right? So I need that these two types of profiles are important and are very different and have a specific scope of responsibilities, I think, right? For the technical profile as programmer, and the other side a generalistic in general person. And maybe I think that the only requisite is you must like cybersecurity. If you like cybersecurity, it's enough, I think.
Fair enough. So you ideally, you need to have your technical head on, obviously, but equally have a bit of curiosity and business acumen about yourself, because it's all about processes, improving efficiency and de-risking effectively into a company. Thank you very much for your time today, Daniel. And to anybody listening, I really recommend going and downloading the IAM survival guide from it's on your newsletter, isn't it? The future of digital identity. But if anybody wants to reach out to you, Daniel, or ask you about some of the tips and tricks or some of the 7 mistakes that are outlined in this guide, where can people reach you?
People can reach me on LinkedIn. Now I have my public profile. I have all of this information, and you can subscribe to my newsletter, The Future of Digital Identity. So here every 2 days I read an article about this topic. So all of you are welcome to subscribe.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for being on today's episode. Thanks so much for being a guest, Daniel.
Thank you, James. Thank you.
Cheers,
bye.
Thank you. Bye.